Section 181, this blackened strong tenfold, was a little sloppy. Then again, sloppy could be a good thing. If it were perfect and strict, it might come with unmanageable drawbacks that made the entry useless. Better to be imperfect but practical. Xiao Ran noticed the buff wasn't permanent. After receiving the tenfold boost, a 12-hour countdown began. In other words, one act of blackening kept him blackened for 12 hours. When it expired, he would have to do it again. 12 hours isn't short, he thought. A little inconvenient, but acceptable. A tiny black spot tore across the sky toward them. Almost the instant Xiao Ran saw it, blackened Clark, eyes crimson, had already arrived. "I'm going to kill you!" Clark snarled. The blackened Clark threw a fist with the force of 300 million tons. The impact flattened the landscape tens of kilometers ahead. Earth split, fissures opened, smoke and dust shot thousands of meters into the sky and blotted out the sun. When the dust settled, a figure stood completely unharmed. Xiao Ran craned his neck and smiled. "Didn't you eat?" he taunted. "You can't even hit people." Those words were poison to a Clark already pushed to the edge by Darkseid's control. He erupted in fury, becoming a streak of black light as he charged. With a single hit, Xiao Ran sent him rocketing into the sky. In the next instant, Xiao Ran disappeared from his original spot, a white streak connecting Earth and the heavens before streaking off toward the edge of the atmosphere. Clark had been kicked so hard his cervical vertebrae dislocated, but the yellow sun's regenerative power stitched him back together. Pain and fury burned hot. He wanted nothing more than to tear this intruder apart. Xiao Ran pursued him into the void. In the vacuum of space, a heat vision beam thundered at blackened Clark, tearing through his biological force field, then his Kryptonian battlesuit, then through flesh and bone. Even the Man of Steel couldn't withstand a beam with a temperature of billions of degrees, one that could cut through planetary cores. Clark's chest was scorched, skin and muscles seared away. His bones glowed molten red. He screamed without sound and fired his own heat vision in return. But under the blackened strong tenfold buff, Xiao Ran was terrifyingly strong, 2 to 3 times Clark's power. On top of that, Xiao Ran used his mental abilities to induce a state of self-hypnosis and layered on infinite rage. The added buff multiplied his strength again by more than 5 times. Stacked together, Xiao Ran's strength exceeded blackened Clark's by over tenfold. No wonder the Man of Steel couldn't stop it, Xiao Ran thought. He grinned, voice squeezing out through the crushing silence. "I should thank you properly. If it weren't for you, I never would have gotten such an excellent entry. As thanks, let me give you death." The infinite rage surged to another level, tenfold amplification, and Clark could no longer resist. A beam of heat vision pierced his back and detonated like a light-speed lance into the starry void. Xiao Ran then grew, instantly towering into a 60-foot giant, and seized blackened Clark in one massive hand. "Die!" he roared. After a frantic, failing struggle, Clark was crushed between Xiao Ran's palms. The yellow sun's power couldn't save him this time. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully achieving the hidden achievement, Superman Terminator. Reward, entry extraction count. Xiao Ran blinked in surprise. A hidden achievement? Hope flared as the entry extraction count rose to 2. Not bad. Another bit of good news. But he wasn't done. Devour. He swallowed every scrap of blackened Clark's flesh and blood. Even the dead could be devoured. Indeed, devouring the dead was easier so long as you had won. Instantly, Xiao Ran's base strength shot up by 300 million tons, and his base speed increased by 5,000 Mach. Even without the doubled buffs, he now dwarfed the old blackened Clark. With a final blast, he returned to the town and landed in the open square where he had first arrived. A lone figure stepped out from a small bungalow, the same Batman who had worn the earth-yellow trench coat earlier. "You won?" Batman asked, looking up. "He's dead," Xiao Ran replied. A flicker of excitement passed through Batman's eyes, then melted into deep, bitter sorrow. A victory had been won, but at a devastating cost. "May I ask you a few questions?" Xiao Ran said. Batman nodded. No matter what else, this man had saved the world from blackened Clark. If belatedly, it was still a salvation. "Are you the only hero who resisted Superman?" Xiao Ran asked. "There were many at first," Batman replied, voice hollow. "Now only I remain. This entire world, fewer than 10,000 living people left. Do you think that's normal? Xiao Ran asked. Those parademons have been capturing people for years, Batman said. Those they catch are either killed or transformed into new parademons. Actually, for thousands of people to still be alive now is already pretty remarkable, Xiao Ran said. The logic held together. He'd been curious whether Batman knew the world he inhabited was only a fragment of a larger reality. It turned out the people here didn't. They made sense of everything for themselves. Batman's explanation that other superheroes had sacrificed themselves fighting Superman and only he remained sounded plausible, even if it wasn't the true story. Xiao Ran had asked for the fun of it. His curiosity was satisfied. There was nothing in that world worth staying for. I should go. Take care of yourself, he said, and vanished in an instant under Batman's startled, hesitant gaze. Batman watched him go and sighed. He had briefly wanted to ask Xiao Ran to gather all the survivors. It would make rebuilding civilization easier. But the parademons still prowled. Gathering everyone in one place would make them prime targets for annihilation. Maybe leaving things as they were was the safer choice. Back in the main universe, Xiao Ran reappeared in the vast starry void after a few hours away. The back and forth had produced an enormous boost to his power. If not for Bruce's brainwaves and the space-time fluctuation that had caused some kind of quantum entanglement, Xiao Ran might never have tried using his space-time travel ability again. He wouldn't have been able to extract the blackened strong tenfold entry from the blackened Clark, nor complete the hidden achievement Superman Terminator, which restored the spent uses for extracting entries. His baseline strength was now several times what it had been just hours before. He smiled to himself. Bruce had done him a favor. Maybe he should repay him. He vanished again. Wayne Manor, Batcave. Bruce had just woken, the fragments of a dream still clinging to him. He bristled at the feeling. Was it a premonition? But was quickly distracted by a notification on his console. Analysis complete. He opened a decrypted folder and read. The white Portuguese wasn't a person at all. It was a ship. Lex Luthor had taken an interest because the vessel had recently visited a spot in the Indian Ocean, the remains of the world engine Superman destroyed 18 months ago. The damaged world engine had left behind artifacts from Krypton, green kryptonite among them. According to Luthor's files, green kryptonite wreaked severe damage on Kryptonian cells. The invulnerable Man of Steel became fragile, essentially human, in its presence. Bruce didn't yet plan to eliminate Superman, but he was a man who prepared. The batch of kryptonite in Luthor's possession was the ideal weapon against Kryptonians. The white Portuguese would arrive at Metropolis Harbor tonight. Bruce closed the file and stood. He'd intercept the shipment from Luthor's men. Whether that was strictly moral was a question he wouldn't lose sleep over. Sometimes dirty methods were the only way to deal with unbeatable enemies. He was Batman, but he was also Bruce Wayne, owner of Wayne Enterprises and one of the richest men in the world, used to getting what money could buy, including the company of women who followed that money. He intended to act immediately. If he waited, he might miss it. When he turned, he found someone watching him. "Hi," Xiao Ran said with a small wave. Bruce's face tightened. "I didn't invite you," he said. "Don't be like that," Xiao Ran replied with an easy smile as he walked over and patted Bruce's shoulder. "I came to give you something. You've trained your body well." Bruce didn't want to waste words. Compared to Superman, he was more wary of this casual, powerful stranger. Superman had helped people in the past year. Xiao Ran did not appear to use his powers for others. He hadn't done anything openly bad either, but Bruce knew you couldn't plan for every possible turn. He was more afraid of a free agent who did as he pleased than a fallen hero who'd once been noble. Xiao Ran reached out and his hand passed through Bruce's chest. Bruce froze. The expected pain never came. He looked down, wide-eyed. The hand was there. He could feel it, but it hadn't harmed him at all. It felt as if it had always been there. "Wait," Xiao Ran said, sounding a little sheepish. "This is my first time doing this. I don't have much experience." What Xiao Ran had come to give Bruce wasn't a weapon or a trinket. It was an ability he'd obtained from Cassandra, the power to analyze and manipulate DNA. With it, he could read a person's genetic code, discern latent traits and potentials, and within limits, stimulate and activate those dormant parts. In short, he could awaken hidden capabilities. Most of human DNA in this world contains large stretches of dormant code, ancestral genes left over from countless cycles of evolution. Many of those sequences are being lost generation by generation. Xiao Ran could activate the high-quality latent genes in Bruce's DNA. He had already scanned Bruce's genome. He'd found traces related to gods, the Greek pantheon in particular, more so than primitive animal genes. Those god-linked sequences were better suited for activation. Switching on animal genes risked altering Bruce's appearance. So Xiao Ran planned to stimulate the god-related potentials. Bruce stared, processing the implication. Xiao Ran continued, "It'll be subtle. I can boost what's already there, not rewrite you, but it will help you reach capabilities you haven't tapped." Bruce's expression was unreadable. He was a man who built contingencies for things he could not yet anticipate. This was unexpected, but useful. Chapter 183, Section 183. Xiao Ran didn't hesitate when he discovered the gene. He activated it immediately. As soon as he did, Bruce felt his body shift. Every muscle swelled and then shrank in a matter of seconds, expanding and contracting several times until it settled back to seeming normal. On the surface, nothing had changed, but Bruce could feel that something fundamental in him had. Xiao Ran withdrew his hand and grinned. "It's done. Want to try it out?" Bruce frowned. "What did you do to me?" His body looked the same, but the sensation was unmistakable. His strength felt massively increased, and his frame felt far denser. He ballied his fists, testing. "It felt like my muscles changed. How much?" "I activated a hidden gene sequence in your DNA from an ancient ancestor," Xiao Ran said. "Want to know where it came from?" "Where from?" Bruce asked, raising his hands to clench his fists again. He could already feel at least a tenfold increase in power. "From the Greek pantheon, Hercules." Xiao Ran's smile deepened. "It looks like your family line had some connection to that demigod. Probably a collateral branch. The divine gene in you is diluted." "Hercules? The demigod?" Bruce's skepticism mixed with dawning recognition. He'd met someone recently, a woman whose presence had felt off. "Are you saying the gods from the myths are real?" "They were, and you already met a member of that pantheon." Bruce thought back, and a face popped into his mind. "Diana?" "Yes, Diana Prince, the daughter of Zeus and the Amazon Queen, a true second-generation god." Xiao Ran's confirmation both surprised and fit with Bruce's instincts. Diana had not been an ordinary person. She had seemed extraordinary in ways he couldn't fully parse. Now Xiao Ran's words made everything click. Diana was the daughter of Zeus. "Demigods aside, thinking about all that won't help now," Xiao Ran said. "Aren't you going to test how much you've changed?" Bruce nodded. He was curious and methodical. His tests were quick and practical: strength, speed, and resistance to injury. First, strength. As he suspected, his power had increased dramatically. He could now lift 5 to 6 tons with his bare hands with ease. His usual training gear felt laughably light. To test properly, he even used the Batmobile as a weight. Next, speed. Bruce had always been a power athlete rather than a sprinter. His best 100-meter time used to be around 11 seconds. Now he could run it in 6 seconds flat. It wasn't quite on par with his newfound raw strength, but it was a massive improvement nonetheless. Finally, resistance to injury. He let someone stab him with a knife. Under normal human strength, it wouldn't have cut the skin. When the knife was driven with about half of a normal person's force, it barely nicked him. Even at full force, the blade only made a shallow scratch, and that wound sealed almost instantly. "Incredible," Bruce breathed. He'd lived as an ordinary man for almost 50 years, but now at nearly half a century old, he had been given extraordinary abilities. It felt like a rebirth. He felt young again. "Those are just surface changes," Xiao Ran said, leaning against the doorframe with a soda in hand. "Activating the divine gene also extends your lifespan far beyond normal human limits." Bruce's interest sharpened. He wasn't greedy for comforts, but longevity mattered, especially if it meant he could protect Gotham longer. He had never been comfortable in his life. He'd accepted the burden because Gotham needed him. If he could live long enough to keep doing that, it mattered. "How much longer?" he asked. "Not a little, 500 or 600 more years," Xiao Ran replied nonchalantly. Bruce's eyebrows shot up. 500 or 600 years? Xiao Ran shrugged. "Yes, For comparison, a typical Kryptonian lifespan is about 3 to 400 years. Then why did you say not much? Bruce asked, baffled. 500 or 600 years is enormous. Xiao Ran smiled. Because Kryptonians can hold a youthful state for centuries, we stay looking like we're in our 20s or 30s for those 3 to 400 years. Bruce fell silent for a moment. So theoretically, Kryptonians could be immortal? Yes, Xiao Ran said. Under a yellow sun, Kryptonians can essentially be immortal. Bruce pressed on, pragmatic as ever. What if there's no yellow sun? Then you can only keep getting older and eventually die of old age, Xiao Ran said, spreading his hands. At least Kryptonians weren't immortal without strings attached, Bruce thought. That sounded like good news. They were sitting in one of the dining rooms on the first floor of Wayne Manor. Xiao Ran had lost count of how many dining rooms the manor contained, but each one seemed larger than the last. The room on the first floor was fully 30% bigger than the one he'd seen on the second. Alfred approached with a platter. "Thank you, Alfred," Xiao Ran said as the butler lifted the cover and the smell of steak filled the air. "It's no trouble, sir. It's my job," Alfred replied. Bruce, having checked his vitals and confirmed nothing was wrong, had hurriedly changed into the Batman suit and gone out. Xiao Ran knew where he was going and what he intended to do. He also knew Bruce's trip wouldn't end quietly. It would only escalate things with Clark, because Clark was in Gotham. Still, Xiao Ran had no intention of intervening. It was between Clark and Bruce. No one needed stopping, and nobody would be seriously hurt. So he relaxed and savored Alfred's cooking. As he finished his third steak, Bruce was already at the docks as Batman. He found the car loaded with kryptonite, but Lex Luthor had not been idle. The security team Luthor sent was competent. Even the Batmobile, despite its performance, lost sight of the target after being hit twice by RPGs. That temporary loss didn't matter. Bruce had already deployed signal trackers. Then an unexpected figure appeared in front of the Batmobile. Superman planted himself in the middle of the road and didn't move. Too late to brake, the Batmobile slammed into him at over 80 miles an hour. The impact left Bruce dizzy inside the car. Superman didn't even flinch. He stood there like an immovable wall. Bruce pried open the jammed door and stormed out. "Do you know what you're doing?" he demanded. Superman looked at him with something close to pity. "Gotham no longer needs Batman," he said. "Don't answer to the lights anymore. Just pretend Batman is dead." Clark had spent the last 2 days looking into Gotham and the Dark Knight. He'd concluded that Batman spread fear, not only among criminals but among ordinary Gotham citizens as well. He believed the city would be better without the Dark Knight. Bruce, who had been Batman for over 20 years, was incensed. Gotham and the mantle of Batman were things he would never surrender while the city needed him. For some stranger from another planet to tell him to retire was intolerable. Bruce's eyes went cold. Superman had officially transformed from a problem into an enemy in his mind. He asked, voice low and hard, "I ask you, do you bleed?" Clark said nothing. He assumed Bruce's rage had gotten the better of him. "Consider this me going easy on you this time," he said, and with a wind of motion, he rose and flew away. Watching him go, something in Bruce hardened. "You will bleed," he said through his teeth, then climbed into the battered Batmobile and drove back toward Wayne Manor. Back at the first-floor dining room, Xiao Ran was on his third steak when Bruce returned. He walked in with a heavy, low pressure about him, pulled a chair, and sat down. Alfred brought Bruce a steaming cup of coffee and set it in front of him, a welcome thing after being out in the rain. Bruce took a sip, set the cup down, and looked at Xiao Ran. "Perhaps you should advise your friend to mind his own business less in the future," he said. Xiao Ran laughed. "That'd be hard. Aren't superheroes the ones who can't help but meddle?" Bruce said nothing more. He finished his coffee, stood, and turned to go upstairs. "Leave when you're done eating. I need to rest," he said. "Alfred, another steak, please," Xiao Ran called after him with a smile. "Yes, sir," Alfred replied without missing a beat. The next day was the hearing on Capitol Hill for Superman. Xiao Ran accompanied Louise. Janet had wanted to come, but couldn't get the day off. Xiao Ran carried a bucket of popcorn and ambled along, trying to keep Louise from worrying. She looked at him helpless. "Aren't you at all worried?" she asked. "What's there to worry about?" Xiao Ran replied, untroubled. At worst, he stops being Superman. The world functioned before him. Louise was left speechless, but she knew as well as anyone that she couldn't give up being a reporter, and Clark couldn't give up being Superman. A sudden hush ran through the crowd. Superman descended from the sky and landed on the steps of Capitol Hill. He glanced at the protesters holding placards and shouting for him to leave the Earth. He'd been exhausted over the past few days, not physically, but mentally. Seeing Louise in the crowd, she nodded at him with encouraging eyes. Xiao Ran waved and grinned, tapping the popcorn in his hands. Clark straightened, drew a steadying breath, and walked into the hearing. The police keeping order watched him as he passed, their expressions a complicated mix of awe and unease. Section 185. At the hearing site, Superman's arrival marked the official start. Xiao Ran used his supervision to peer through the walls and take in the scene inside the chamber. His gaze swept the room and landed on a former Wayne Enterprises employee named Wallace. He focused on Wallace's wheelchair and froze. He couldn't see through it. Something inside the chair had been lined with lead. Had Clark noticed? Probably not. If he had, he wouldn't have stood there watching. Or maybe he'd seen it and simply didn't think anyone would go to such lengths. Who would expect a suicidal attack hidden in a wheelchair? Wallace himself didn't even know. His chair had been given to him by someone connected to Lex Luthor. The bomb inside had been planted by people working for Lex. Lex Luthor shouldn't have even been at the Capitol that day. He'd slipped out a back door hours earlier. If Clark's mother hadn't been named Martha, Lex's plan might have worked. Xiao Ran munched popcorn and shook his head. Who would have thought Bruce would let the chance to kill Superman go just because of a name? The whole no-kill thing. Puh. Bruce's restraint applied to humans. He hadn't shown mercy to parademons later on. Why would Superman be treated any differently? Minutes later, a massive explosion ripped through the chamber. The hearing hall became a roiling sea of fire. Clark hovered in the blaze, grief written on his face, as if someone had clawed his heart. Outside, the placard wavers panicked. Oh my God, did Superman just go berserk in there? I knew Kryptonians couldn't be trusted. Get off our planet. Calm down. Maybe the explosion wasn't Superman. Maybe someone was trying to kill him. Kill Superman? He's invincible. Not even a nuke takes him down. You think some bomb can? Are you stupid? It's a conspiracy. It has to be a conspiracy. The crowd spun into hysteria. Clark flew out of the Capitol carrying 2 wounded survivors. After handing them to the police, he went back into the fire to pull more people out. Louise tugged on Xiao Ran's sleeve, breathless. Someone's plotting against Clark. I know, Xiao Ran said, motioning for her to calm down. Come over tonight. You can be with Clark, help him settle. We'll figure the rest out later. Louise nodded, then watched Clark plunge back into the flames with a pained expression. That evening at Louise's apartment, Louise held Clark while she comforted him. He sat hunched, despondent. Xiao Ran arrived with a half smile. Am I interrupting? Should I come back later? They let go of each other when they heard him. Louise gave Xiao Ran a small, helpless shake of her head, admitting she couldn't make things better. Maybe you're right. I can't fix this world. Maybe the world would be better off without me. Clark's face was taut with pain and confusion. He'd been doing everything he could to help people. Why were they always targeting him? Had he crossed someone's interest? Or was it that the world simply couldn't accept him? You thinking of giving up? Xiao Ran asked, taking a seat on the small couch. I'm not like you, he added more loudly, leaning forward. I believe in repaying wrongs with wrongs. If anyone plots against me or tries to hurt me, I don't let them walk away. I make them pay back 1,000-fold. Clark looked up, bewildered at Xiao Ran's bluntness. Someone is actually plotting against you. They want to make your life impossible, maybe even kill you. Xiao Ran watched Clark struggle with the old lessons from his adoptive father. Jonathan told me I shouldn't, Clark began. Forget what your adoptive father taught you for a second, Xiao Ran interrupted. What do you feel? He tapped Clark's chest lightly. What's in here? Anger? Aren't you suffocating inside? You're Superman, not some person who has to silently take every blow. Clark's expression flickered. He was furious and stifled, but the values ingrained since childhood held him back from turning that anger outward. Do you think the other side will stop if you just step away? Xiao Ran pressed. They hate you. Do you really think this ends here? If I stop being Superman, what else can they do to me? Clark asked with a bitter smile. Xiao Ran's eyes landed on Luis. Do you really think no one knows you're Superman? If someone could plant a bomb in the Capitol and they weren't afraid of being found out, they can find out your secret too. Clark went pale. If the assailant knew his identity, then Luis and his mother Martha could be targets. He straightened. I have to find out who did this. You can choose not to retaliate for your own sake, Xiao Ran said calmly, but you won't let anyone threaten the people you care about. Louise and Martha are your bottom line. Clark's resolve hardened. Xiao Ran clapped his hands once. Good, at least now you know what to do next. He grinned and added more casually, Louise, have you two had dinner? If not, order some takeout. I'm a bit hungry. Louise laughed through the tension and went to call. They ate in uneasy silence. The next morning, Xiao Ran returned from a mission in space with an authentic Chinese breakfast. When Janet came out rubbing her eyes and smelled the food, she smiled. You always get up so early. Early to bed, early to rise, Xiao Ran said, handing her a plate. Go wash up and come eat. Janet nodded and padded to the bathroom. They ate quickly. After breakfast, Janet asked, Are you free tonight? Dinner together? Not tonight, Xiao Ran said. And listen, stay home. Don't go out. What's wrong? She asked. It's going to be chaotic tonight, he said. Just don't go out. Avoid danger. Janet shrugged off the cryptic warning but agreed. Even if Xiao Ran had told her the truth, that a Kryptonian monster might rampage through Metropolis and Gotham, she wouldn't have believed him. Okay, I'll head home early. Janet nodded, not asking any more questions. Such a good girl, she murmured. Xiao Ran smiled and patted her head. Janet swatted his hand away with a small, impatient scowl. Xiao Ran had been out in space, basking in the sun, watching the city from above. Night had already fallen over Metropolis when a scream cut through the dark. He looked down and across the distance saw Louise tumbling off a rooftop and Clark streaking toward her. Clark caught Louise before she hit the street, set her safely on the curb, then flew up to the helipad on the roof. Lex Luthor stood there, clapping with a wide, smug grin. Brilliant, simply brilliant, Lex crowed. You always manage to arrive just in time, don't you? Clark's eyes were ice. Have I ever hurt you? He asked. Lex smiled and shook his head. Of course not. We've never even met. Then why are you doing this? What does any of this gain you? Clark demanded, knuckles white. He could feel the heat gathering behind his eyes, heat vision, the instant solution, but he couldn't use it. He was Superman, a symbol of justice, not a tyrant who resolved things by killing. You misunderstand me, Lex said. This isn't for me, it's for all of humanity. Clark's laugh was ugly and incredulous. Do you even hear yourself? For all of humanity? You're plotting to destroy me and that's for everyone's benefit? Lex's smile hardened. A being with enough power to destroy the world does not belong above humanity. Do you think people need a Superman who lorded over them? Humanity doesn't need you, so I'll destroy you, tear down your false halo, and end what you represent. My goal is to kill you. You want to kill me? You by yourself? Clark said, disbelief mixing with anger. Not by myself. Lex nodded toward the bay. A beam of light stabbed up into the clouded sky. In its center glowed the familiar bat symbol. Clark's jaw tightened. Only days earlier, he'd tracked Batman down and told him not to answer any such summons. Now the bat signal was burning in the sky. Lex produced a handful of photos and tossed them to Clark. In them, Martha Kent sat in a chair, hands bound, a gag in her mouth. Clark's world narrowed to a white-hot core of fury. How dare you? He roared, staring at Lex. Lex spread his hands, almost apologetic. If you kill me, Martha dies. If you keep your principles, she dies. Now choose. Kill him and bring me his head, Lex said bluntly. Or stay true to your morals and walk away while your wife, your mother, dies. Clark felt a hatred so pure he could hardly breathe. Lex's face, satisfied, provoking, made every instinct scream for violence. But Martha was captive. He didn't even know where she was being held. 3 minutes, no, 3 seconds, Lex said cheerfully, holding up 3 fingers like a game show host. 3, 2, 1. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the screen. Stop, Clark shouted, but it was too late. Lex wasn't dissuaded. He merely smirked. Fine. Go find Batman, Lex said. 10 minutes. If you can't bring me Batman's head in 10 minutes, say goodbye to Martha forever. He tapped his watch. Timer starts now. Clark vanished from the helipad in a blur. All that remained above Metropolis was the thin streak of a sonic boom. Lex laughed loudly and climbed into the waiting helicopter, pleased as a man watching a plan unfurl. On the other side of the bay, at the abandoned Gotham Harbor, Bruce Wayne looked up at the bat signal burning above the skyline. He was studying its light when a body slammed down onto the concrete before him. Superman. The sight of him lit a flare of rage in Bruce, anger that had been stoked into a cold, relentless fire. "Bruce, listen to me. We're out of time," Clark began. "Lex." Before Clark could finish, two devices at Bruce's side screamed to life and unleashed super-strong sonic waves. Normally, Superman's hearing could pick up a pin drop across continents. Bruce was testing whether sound could hurt him. The waves struck, and the two devices shredded themselves in a crackling cascade, but Bruce wasn't deterred. This was only the first layer of defense. Machine guns on remote mounts rose, aircraft-grade cannons streaming a hail of metal at Clark. The rounds struck, flaring sparks along the Man of Steel's skin, but they barely slowed him. He lifted, fired his heat vision in a precise, searing sweep, and obliterated the two cannons. Then he dropped straight into the space in front of Bruce. "You just won't listen, will you?" Clark said, breathless. 10 minutes. Time was bleeding away. He wanted this over, wanted to save Martha. Bruce's face was stony. He'd prepared for this night with a dozen contingencies. Tonight he intended to stop Superman, by any means necessary. The two of them were poised on the edge of violence, and then, in a heartbeat, Clark moved. Chapter 187, Section 187, Bang. Bruce's body skidded back several meters. Clark blinked. He hadn't used much force, certainly not what would send a normal human 10 meters or more, but Bruce had only slid a few yards. That wasn't the reaction of an ordinary man. "That's not the strength a Superman should have," Clark muttered. Bruce charged forward and swung at Clark's head. Bang! Clark raised a hand to block. The punch had unexpected power, at least several tons behind it. Clark's X-ray vision flicked on. He saw Bruce's internal structure. Muscles far larger than a normal human's, bone denser and tougher, and a heart beating with unnatural vigor. This wasn't a regular human body. "You got prepared to kill me?" Clark said, surprised. Bruce roared and kept throwing fists, but his blows were useless. A few tons of force barely registered on Clark. He hadn't taken the fight seriously at all. If he had, he could have ended it before Bruce fully reacted. "Stop. You're not my opponent," Clark said calmly. Bruce kept going. He kicked low, an attack that meant nothing to Clark physically but stung his pride. Clark, irritated, caught Bruce, hurled him dozens of meters, and Bruce crashed to the ground. Before he could rise, Clark walked up and kicked him through the outer wall of a dilapidated building. The impact shattered several layers of ceiling. Clark landed on the rooftop. He rose into the sky, and for a moment his temper flared. A beam of heat vision struck the bat signal below. The signal exploded into sparks. "It's over, Bruce," Clark said as he landed on the rooftop again, trying to calm himself enough to talk. Bruce didn't want to talk. From the ground, he pulled a small firearm and fired. Clark barely registered it at first. A shotgun round should be meaningless. Then the bullet exploded on contact, and a cloud of green dust burst out. Clark inhaled it, micronized fragments of crushed kryptonite. Immediately his limbs went heavy, his vision blurred. He staggered and frowned as he saw the green motes still drifting in the air. "What did you do, Bruce?" he asked, alarmed. Bruce reloaded and fired again. Then he lobbed 2 smoke grenades that detonated into more kryptonite dust at Clark's feet. The air filled with the deadly particles, and Clark's strength drained further. "Now, you'll bleed," Bruce shouted, rushing forward. He tackled Clark and headbutted him through the broken hole they'd just made. Boom, boom, boom. They punched through floor after floor. Bruce held on and kept smashing his fists into Clark's face as they dropped. Finally, they crashed through to the first floor rubble and rolled apart. Bruce sprang up and rushed in again. Clark, weakened by the kryptonite and barely on his feet, tried to stand, but Bruce's combo sent him reeling. For a moment, Bruce's blows left Superman looking shaken, but then the weakening effect began to fade. Clark's body steadied, his resilience returned. The punches glanced off him without even making his skin move. Clark shoved gently, and Bruce slammed through 3 walls, flying into another room. Clark followed, but another kryptonite round detonated as soon as he entered. Green dust blew into his face. His already fragile strength sagged. Bruce seized a heavy stone slab, several 100 pounds, and smashed it over Clark again and again. When Bruce finished, Clark lay on the ground, unable to rise. "This world doesn't need you, Superman," Bruce snarled, grabbing Clark's leg and whipping him toward the wall. The wall exploded outward, and Clark went with it, tumbling into the dust and rubble outside. A faint green glow crept across the debris. Bruce emerged with a kryptonite spear, stepping toward Clark and kicking him so he rolled over. He planted his boot on Clark's chest and shoved the spear up toward his face. "Now you can bleed," he said. He used the tip to slice Clark's cheek. A line of crimson, alien blood welled and ran. The sight of a god of Earth bleeding did something ugly to the scene. Reverence eroded from a single wound. Clark, weak and gasping, tried to speak. "Save," he croaked. "No one will save you," Bruce spat, assuming Clark was begging for help. "Save Martha!" Clark managed, the name tortured out. Bruce's face twisted. "What did you say? What Martha? Who are you talking about?" he demanded, anger and confusion flaring together. Martha, that was the name of his mother. Bruce's voice shook. A familiar voice came from the other side of the ruined room. "The Martha Clark's talking about is his adoptive mother." Xiao Ran stepped into the light, clad in white and gold patterned battle armor. Clark's breath hitched at the mention. Bruce stared at the newcomer, stunned. "What did you say?" Bruce barked. "I said Martha is Clark's foster mother," Xiao Ran replied as he walked closer. Chapter 188, Section 188. Xiao Ran reached out and took the kryptonite spear from Bruce's hand. The radiating green metal still sapped whoever touched it. As he approached, its influence tried to weaken him. He felt it, a drop in strength, from over 380 million tons to just over 350 million tons. Still terrifyingly strong. But the biokinetic field that flowed through him was being interfered with. Any powers tied to his Kryptonian bloodline were weakened, even suppressed. It didn't matter. Xiao Ran's strength didn't come from Kryptonian blood alone. He had mutant powers, Shazam's power, Shabak's, the devouring spider, and others that kryptonite could not touch. He also discovered a way to shield himself from the metal's effects. He let the divine power inside him cloak his outer layer, creating a barrier that blocked the kryptonite's influence entirely. Bruce looked surprised. "That's enough, Bruce," Xiao Ran said. "You've proven yourself. Stop." He weighed the spear in his hand once, then tossed it aside. With a sharp whistle, the weapon embedded itself in a distant wall. As the kryptonite moved away, Clark on the ground finally had room to breathe. His body slowly began to recover. Though he was still weak, he'd inhaled a lot of kryptonite dust, and dust didn't clear that quickly. The cut on his face still bled. "Xiao Ran, Martha. Lex took Martha." Clark struggled to sit up as he spoke. "I already took care of Martha," Xiao Ran said. "She's safe." Before coming here, he had gone to the abandoned factory where Lex's men were holding Martha Kent, dealt with them, and sent her home. Hearing that, Clark sagged to the ground in relief, a smile breaking across his face. Footsteps pounded toward them. Louise, running over. "Clark," she called, alarmed when she saw him on the ground. "How are you?" Clark gave her a small, reassuring shake of the head. "I'll be fine, just a little weak." With Louise's help, he got to his feet. "This was all Lex," Clark said to Bruce. "The bombing at the hearing, the accusations, and tonight, he kidnapped Martha and forced me into this." Mention of Martha calmed Bruce. He had already vented some of his fury in their fight, and the name itself carried weight. Louise added, "There have been flashes over at the spaceship since earlier. I need to check it out. Lex has to be doing something there." Clark pushed Louise's hand away gently. "I'll go with you." Bruce's jaw set. He'd been played by Lex this time. Anger had opened the trap. He intended to settle it. "Be careful," he told them. Xiao Ran's expression shifted. It might already be too late. They all turned to him. He stared into the distance. His sight pierced the scout ship. Inside, something new had already been created. "Lex is finished," he said. "He's used Zod's body to create a doomsday." Clark's face went pale. "What did he do?" "It's doomsday," Xiao Ran said. "He resurrected one using Zod." Bruce and Louise didn't recognize the name. Clark's voice went very quiet and very serious. Doomsday is Krypton's ultimate biological weapon, he said. Krypton created it to use against enemies, but they underestimated it. It nearly destroyed Krypton itself. If they hadn't managed to banish that thing, Krypton might not have survived. Xiao Ran looked at Clark. Do you still have it in you to fight? Of course, Clark said, nodding. But Xiao Ran didn't believe him. The cut on Clark's face hadn't healed. Bruce, take Louise and get her out of the city, Xiao Ran said. I'll take Clark up so he can recover in the sun. Okay, Bruce agreed without hesitation. Louise grabbed Clark's hand, eyes full of worry. Don't worry, I'll be fine, Clark told her. He hugged her quickly, then let go and faced Xiao Ran. I'm not going to hug you, Xiao Ran said. Before Clark could reply, Xiao Ran gripped his shoulder. In an instant, they shot up through the rooftop, blasted through heavy clouds, and left the atmosphere. The sun hung ahead, a distant star pouring heat and light. As the sunlight fell on Clark, the gash on his face sealed in an instant, and the weakness drained away. In moments, he was back to peak condition. All right, Clark said, nodding. Go, Xiao Ran replied in his mind. His voice echoed in Clark's head with a clarity that made Clark look at him with curiosity, eyes asking where he'd learned the trick. Xiao Ran only chuckled. They dove back toward Metropolis together. At the city's center, the scout ship ruptured. A terrifying creature burst through its hull, a 3-meter-tall monstrosity that cleared hundreds of meters in a single bound and landed on the roof of a high rise. It roared at the sky as a batwing streaked toward it from the distance. Inside the cockpit, Bruce saw the creature on the rooftop and tightened his grip. Several attack helicopters had the building surrounded. They'd been dispatched to check on the Krypton ship after its exterior systems had been discharging electricity for more than 10 minutes. Then half of Eagle Country had gone dark. North and northwest plunged into a blackout. Lex had drained an enormous amount of power to bring Doomsday into being. Now the newborn monster stood on the rooftop and roared up at the helicopters circling overhead. Report, monster sighted, came the radio call. Take it out, bring the body back, an order barked from command. The soldiers responded, slamming the rocket launch buttons. Rockets lanced down at Doomsday. The explosions set the rooftop ablaze. The creature instinctively raised his arms to shield his face. Freshly born, he was still vulnerable, but not to ordinary munitions. When the smoke cleared, Doomsday stood unscathed. Worse, the attack enraged him. With a bestial roar, he leapt dozens of meters, snatched an attack helicopter with a single enormous hand, and dragged it into the ground. The pilot and 2 crewmen screamed and fired as the fist came down, but it was useless. The pilot's upper body was obliterated in an instant, a spray of gore across the cockpit. The helicopter detonated. Its fuel and onboard munitions blew, setting off secondary explosions. Crimson arcs of electricity, lightning born of the blast, ripped outward in a shockwave that raced for kilometers. The remaining helicopters were torn apart. Their detonations echoed across the city. Bruce, who had just arrived in the Batwing, saw the chain of explosions and dropped the craft behind a neighboring building. The glass on the facade shattered under the shockwave, and the Batwing shuddered, but escaped serious damage. He took a breath and keyed his comms. Alfred, did you see that? What is that thing? On the other end, Alfred's voice was calm but grave. A terrifying creature. It reminds me a little of Abomination, though I realize you may find that an odd comparison given the publications. Bruce eased the Batwing out from cover. Doomsday hadn't stopped growing. The newborn had been around 3 meters tall, a bloated, muscled thing with a flattened, nearly noseless face. Now, he stood closer to 3.5 meters, bulk dramatically increased, parts of his joints armored with horn-like plates. He looked more monstrous than before. Are you sure you want to engage that? Alfred asked. Even watching through the Batwing's cameras, the thing did not look like a foe any ordinary man, even Batman, could handle. I don't have a better option, Bruce said. We fight. Alfred sighed, knowing Bruce's nature. Very well. You pilot. I'll handle the weapons. A burst of cannon fire cut toward Doomsday. The monster, mid-roar, snapped his head and seemed to swallow the spray of bullets, then spat them out in a hail of brass and barked as he charged. He couldn't fly, but he could jump. Now, Bruce called and launched a missile from the Batwing's belly. The missile found its mark. The building Doomsday struck crumpled under the impact, and he crashed through it with bone-jarring force. Offices where people had been working late collapsed. Dozens of unlucky souls were crushed in the instant the monster smashed through. The blast and subsequent collapse left the rooftop and surrounding floors a ruin. Doomsday rose without a mark on him, and the Batwing's detonations had done nothing meaningful to stop him. Bruce watched the casualties and felt the familiar, old guilt flare, the memory of his anger at Clark after last year's battle with Zod swelling in his chest. The irony wasn't lost on him. An alien battle in the city had once cost lives, and now he was here again in the middle of another catastrophe. Doomsday leapt from the ruined building and with unerring speed caught hold of one wing of the Batwing as it hovered above. The aircraft tilted hard, unbalanced. "Alfred," Bruce shouted. "Don't worry, sir. Watch this," came the butler's voice. Alfred took control of the craft's maneuvering and spun the Batwing around a central axis. Doomsday, clutching the wing, was flung like a rag doll and slammed into a storefront below. The throw had its cost. A large section of the Batwing's wing was ripped free, and the craft began to falter, wobbling as power bled off and systems failed. Bruce made a decision. "Detonate all remaining ordnance on the Batwing and set it on that thing," he ordered, pressing the ejection. The canopy snapped open, and a catapult ejected him into the night. "From now on, you're on your own, Master Wayne," Alfred said quietly. The wounded Batwing, papered with damage, pitched downward right toward Doomsday. Then, in a single, monstrous release, the aircraft's remaining ammunition detonated. The explosion engulfed Doomsday and everything in the air around him for dozens of meters. When the blast cleared, rubble and flame filled the street. News helicopters from Metropolis TV and Gotham TV were already arriving, latching their cameras on the scene. "Is that Batman?" one reporter cried into a camera guttered by smoke. "Where's Batman? Did he die with the monster?" another shouted. "Batman's dead, great," someone jeered from a distance. "Are you idiots?" a colleague snapped. "If Batman's dead, who's going to deal with this thing?" Voices and sirens rose as the city tried to assess the damage. Doomsday, born of Lex's experiments and fed on power, still stood amid the wreckage, a living nightmare no protocol seemed able to stop. "Stop arguing. That thing isn't dead. No way. I saw Batman. The Batwing crashed, but Batman isn't dead either." Live streams on major platforms were exploding. People watching the feeds began arguing and cheering. Some Gotham crooks had been celebrating the Batwing's crash, assuming Batman and the creature had died together. They celebrated too soon. Sharp-eyed viewers spotted Batman clinging to a building in the upper left corner of the frame. He was alive. So was the monster, and it had just grown larger. Metropolis, near Heroes Park. A crimson storm of energy swept over several kilometers. At its center, a nearly 4-meter-tall creature roared at the sky. Doomsday, after a second evolution, was even more terrifying. Bruce, clutching the side of a building with one hand, watched the monster and frowned. This thing didn't seem killable. Fortunately, Clark and Xiao Ran arrived then. Clark's figure dropped from the sky and landed between Doomsday and the city. The cameras caught everything. "Superman! Superman's here! Go, Superman! Kill it! Thank God it's him! Superman never loses! Superman, I want to marry you!" The internet was fickle. Plenty of people who had been bashing Superman days ago suddenly rediscovered his virtues in the face of Doomsday. One minute, the message boards demanded Superman leave Earth. The next, they were his biggest fans. Clark ignored the chatter. He had the power to back up the praise. In the movie timeline, Clark had just finished a brutal fight with Batman and still had kryptonite in his bloodstream, his strength suppressed. But this Clark had gone into space with Xiao Ran earlier to soak up solar radiation and was back at peak power. Doomsday, only twice evolved, was no match. Clark punched him clear out of Metropolis, deliberately driving the fight away from civilians. The blow sent Doomsday flying over 10 kilometers until he crashed onto a small island between Metropolis and Gotham. Doomsday staggered to his feet, bellowed, and a crimson storm erupted from him, sweeping the entire island. He evolved again, this time to 4.5 meters, with bone spurs jutting from his arms, back, and knees. Clark chased and struck him in the head, but the result was different. Where a single punch had sent him kilometers before, now Clark only managed to slide Doomsday 100 meters. Clark's face hardened. The creature had grown several times stronger with the new evolution. No, Clark muttered. He keeps evolving. Unless he's killed in one blow, he'll just get stronger. Clark didn't know there was an even worse possibility in the comics. Doomsday would revive and return even deadlier. For now, he was dealing with the movie version. Dangerous enough. Xiao Ran found Bruce, panting, and asked, "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. Can Superman beat him alone?" Bruce asked, eyes on the crimson storm in the distance. "He can't finish him," Bruce said. "Doomsday will keep evolving. Unless he's killed outright, he'll only grow stronger as the fight goes on." Xiao Ran tried to keep the mood steady. "Don't lose hope. It's not a failing to be unable to kill Doomsday. Krypton made one before, and their Doomsday was far worse. But Krypton didn't fall because of it, did they?" Bruce pressed. "How did they handle it?" Bruce asked. "Simple," Xiao Ran said. "Doomsday's intelligence is animal level, and he can't fly. You banish him into space." Bruce let out a breath. Not everything was lost. "Do you want a lift?" Xiao Ran offered. "No, I can manage." Bruce shook his head, fired his grappling hook, and swung to another rooftop like a man in a cape playing Spider-Man. "Batman doing a Spider-Man impression?" Xiao Ran smiled, then turned to look toward Metropolis Airport, where a woman on a plane ready to take off watched the battle unfold, worried. Back on the island, the fight continued. After 3 evolutions, Doomsday was almost equal to Clark, no longer an easy opponent. He charged like a living tank and slammed into Superman. Clark met him midair, pushing back with both hands but still thrown a distance. "Not enough damage!" Clark growled and unleashed heat vision. The beam scorched Doomsday, forcing him back hundreds of meters and charring his chest. Clark increased the intensity, but before the beam could burn through, Doomsday screamed, summoned another crimson storm, and the island shook. Abandoned buildings collapsed under the bolts. Some lightning struck Clark, and he winced. When the light cleared, Doomsday had evolved a 4th time, standing 5 meters tall, all but a demon king, far more ferocious. Clark swore under his breath. Against the 2nd evolution Doomsday he could dominate. Against the 3rd he had only a slight edge, and now the balance had flipped. Bruce landed beside Clark, frowning at the towering beast. He got bigger. "Before I could still suppress him," Bruce said. "Now, even I probably couldn't hold him down." "Xiao said he could be banished into space," Clark said. "That could work," Bruce replied, "but as you can see, this one's covered in weapons." Clark nodded, but the problem was, who would banish him into space? "Right, where's Xiao Ran?" he asked. "He's up there." Bruce pointed to Doomsday's head. Clark followed his finger and saw Xiao Ran hovering in the sky, watching Doomsday below with keen interest. "Tsk, bigger really is stronger, huh?" Xiao Ran muttered. With every evolution, Doomsday's body kept getting larger. It reminded him of a certain unholy road sacred beast, though Doomsday wasn't as exaggerated. If you were judging by terrifying appearance, the road sacred beast still had the edge. "Let me see your entries first," Xiao Ran muttered to himself. Then, with a single, thunderous stomp, he descended and landed on the newly evolved Doomsday, the one that had just finished its 4th evolution, driving it into the ground. The island shook violently, the surrounding sea churned into towering waves. Bones cracked throughout Doomsday's body under Xiao Ran's foot. Xiao Ran hadn't used full strength, but the kick had been on the order of 80 million tons. No creature at only 4 evolutions could easily endure that. For a moment, Xiao Ran glanced down, worried. Wait, did I just stomp him to death? Fortunately, this version of Doomsday wasn't completely unreal. It didn't possess a true undying body or Doomsday Spore abilities. Had he killed it, that would have been a big loss. But it wasn't dead. From deep underground, a blinding crimson storm of lightning erupted, striking Xiao Ran. He stood unmoved and watched as Doomsday, having evolved again in the pit below his feet, began to howl, low at first, then louder and louder, a terrifying chorus that rose from the earth. The creature's 5-meter frame swelled to 6 meters and grew a thick exoskeleton, truly armored now, likely because Xiao Ran had nearly stomped it to death. This evolution leaned heavily toward defense. The 6-meter Doomsday vaulted out of the pit and launched a punch at the hovering Xiao Ran. "Still can't fly, trash!" Xiao Ran scoffed. Doomsday's speed was sluggish. Xiao Ran easily dodged the blow and slapped it. The impact turned Doomsday into a meteor, sending it crashing in a diagonal arc down onto the island. A menu unfolded before Xiao Ran's eyes. Do you want to extract the character entry for target character Doomsday? Target character Doomsday has multiple character entries detected. Please select one for extraction. A list appeared. Infinite evolution. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. As long as I'm injured, I will evolve specifically to counter the way I was harmed. Does not change appearance. I am your Doomsday. As Krypton's ultimate biological weapon, Doomsday's strength is beyond doubt. Extracting this entry grants all of Doomsday's current power, power only, not including evolutionary abilities. Resurrection. You have died once, but now you live again in another way. Bigger is stronger. Each time strength increases, body size also increases. Doomsday had 4 entries. Entries 1 and 2 made Xiao Ran's eyes light up. If the third genuinely gave resurrection, he would have grabbed it in a heartbeat, but that entry was merely a description of Doomsday's origins, not an ability grant. The 4th entry, bigger is stronger, was mostly useless to him. Strength increasing with size, and the growth was irreversible. He had no desire to become a hulking giant. What about his close female friends? Good thing I completed that hidden achievement earlier, Xiao Ran thought. Otherwise, he would have been forced to pick between 2 entries this time. He studied entries 1 and 2. Both were incredibly valuable. The first, Infinite Evolution, would let him gain an ability like Doomsday's, targeted evolution that adapted specifically to the damage received. In the comics, Doomsday was practically impossible to kill twice by the same attack. Even a toned-down version of that ability would be a huge asset. Against opponents far stronger than him in the Zongman world, repeated injuries could trigger evolutions that gradually closed the gap, eventually turning the tide. The second entry, I Am Your Doomsday, would instantly grant him Doomsday's current raw power. That was exactly what Xiao Ran had suspected Doomsday possessed, and it was why he'd planned to let the creature evolve a few times before extracting its entry. Maximize the yield, then strike to finish it. Still, he wasn't reckless. Greed could backfire, but with the targeted evolution ability in hand, Xiao Ran felt confident. If Doomsday could evolve, so could he. You evolve, I evolve, let's see who can out-evolve whom. There were, however, obvious differences between this Doomsday and the comic book version. 2 stood out. First, this Doomsday lacked the comic's near-absolute regenerative power. In the comics, Doomsday could recover completely from almost nothing. This version did not seem to possess such extreme regeneration. It might be possible to kill it outright, even by decapitation. Second, it didn't exhibit the Doomsday Spore ability, a core, overpowered trait in the original. Those 2 absences made this incarnation of Doomsday less invulnerable than its legend suggested. The evolution ability allowed Doomsday to grow continuously stronger and to evolve specific powers to counter threats. And the Doomsday Spore meant Doomsday could never truly be killed. Even if one body died, he could be reborn through another. Terrifying. Unless something erased you at a conceptual level, conventional methods simply could not kill Doomsday if he possessed the spore. However, if that's the case, I won't have enough extraction attempts to take both entries. Xiao Ran thought. Then he acted. System, extract the Infinite Evolution entry. Ding, extraction successful. In an instant, Xiao Ran had extracted Doomsday's Infinite Evolution entry. He now possessed the same ability as Doomsday, the power to evolve indefinitely. He didn't rush to extract the other entry, I Am Your Doomsday. He would wait and let Doomsday evolve a few more times. There would be time. No sooner had Xiao Ran extracted Infinite Evolution than Doomsday, who had just been slapped away, started to have trouble. That earlier blow had disoriented him. He had only just gotten to his feet and hadn't yet located the bug that had struck him when Diana, who had rushed in from behind, severed one of his legs with a single sword strike. One of his lower legs, nearly 2 meters long, was sheared off, and the newly risen Doomsday lost his balance and slammed heavily to the ground. Who is that? Clark, who had been about to help, turned in surprise and asked Bruce when he saw the sudden woman appear. Diana, a demigod, Bruce said, looking her over. In her battle armor, she looked nothing like the civilian they'd met before. She resembled the woman from the old photograph. Demigod? So gods really exist? Clark asked, surprised. Bruce nodded. You didn't know? Clark shook his head. How would I? I thought you knew, Bruce said. Xiao Ran told me Diana was a demigod. Xiao Ran told you? Clark repeated in surprise. He never mentioned any of this to me. Perhaps you just haven't encountered it yet. Rumble, a vast sheet of crimson lightning swept across the sky. Bruce frowned and raised an arm to shield his face. A bolt of crimson lightning nearly struck him, but he dodged in time. Several bolts struck Clark, the tingling making him feel semi-paralyzed. Doomsday, having completed his 6th evolution, had become even more grotesque and colossal. At 7 meters tall, he was a true giant. He roared at the bug in front of him, and then an enormous beam of heat vision suddenly erupted, carrying a superheated intensity and blasted toward Diana. Diana raised her sword to block, but she had underestimated the power of Doomsday's heat vision and was blasted backward. "Ao! Roar!" the 7-meter Doomsday bellowed, and with a single punch of his massive hand, he slammed the small island beneath his feet. Boom! With hundreds of millions of tons of force, the island shattered. "Grab me!" Clark shouted to Bruce. Bruce grabbed Clark's shoulder, and the two rocketed into the sky together. Below them, the ground collapsed. The small island, nearly 20 square kilometers, sank into the sea in minutes. Clark, flying overhead, could only stare in disbelief. "Doomsday is evolving into something more and more terrifying," Clark said. "What do we do?" Bruce's voice was grim. This was beyond what a mortal like him could handle. With his physiology, a direct hit from Doomsday would kill him instantly. He looked to Diana for options. A figure flew up beside them, Diana, holding her golden lasso of truth. The other end of the lasso was tied to a cloud. She used it to launch herself into the air. How the lasso could anchor to a cloud was beyond ordinary explanation. She was a demigod, after all. "What's with this big guy? Did you two cause this?" Diana asked. "No, it was Lex," Clark said. "Humans always courting death," Diana said, as if she was used to it. She had lived for centuries and seen humanity repeat the same mistakes. Bruce spoke up. "I have a kryptonite spear," Bruce said. "Since this monster is a product of Krypton, he should be vulnerable to kryptonite." "Good. Where is your spear?" Diana asked. "It's not here," Bruce replied. "Then you should hurry. I feel like he's heading toward Gotham." Diana pointed downward. Doomsday, unable to fly, had fallen into the sea when the island collapsed, but he had leapt from the seabed straight to the surface and was heading toward Gotham. "Damn it," Bruce cursed. "Superman, I need you to take me there." "No problem." Clark nodded, ready to move. "Wait," Diana called out. "You might not need to go. Someone has already gone." Clark and Bruce looked down. A huge black shadow streaked past them and shot into the high sky. Whoosh! Xiao Ran's figure appeared beside them. "Your situation is your business. This one's mine," Xiao Ran said. Then, without waiting for a reply, he chased after Doomsday into the sky. After 6 evolutions, Doomsday's strength had already surpassed what he'd been in the movie when the kryptonite spear had fatally wounded him. He was no longer someone Clark and the others could handle alone. Xiao Ran wouldn't let them rush in and die. This would be a one-on-one fight between him and Doomsday. After all, Xiao Ran's victory condition was to solo Doomsday. What is soloing? It meant one person would have to take Doomsday down alone, no help. Fortunately for Xiao Ran, there really was no one left who could intervene. Inside a military base, General Swanwick had just received an order from the White Palace: launch an intercontinental ballistic missile immediately. It carried 6 nuclear warheads, and its target was the Kryptonian monster streaking out of the atmosphere. "General, can a nuclear bomb kill that thing?" the colonel at his side asked. Swanwick glanced at her, and then at the large screen. "If even a nuclear bomb can't kill it," he said quietly, "then we'll have to put our hopes on Clark and the others." On the command room's screen, 2 red dots were closing fast. The smaller dot was the target, Doomsday. The larger one, the ICBM already in flight, carrying 6 800,000-ton warheads. 6 warheads meant a total yield of 4.8 million tons. "God help us," Swanwick murmured. At 200,000 meters, the missile locked onto Doomsday. Doomsday, sent flying by Xiao Ran's earlier punch, was now uncontrollably exiting the atmosphere. Unable to fly, he had no control over his trajectory in space. 3, 2, 1. The missile struck Doomsday's massive form with unerring accuracy. A blinding white light blossomed 200 kilometers up, like a second sun. The clouds were ripped apart, and people across the hemisphere watched that new sun. hang in the night sky. In Gotham and Metropolis, the flash was so intense, citizens had to shield their eyes. Clark and the others saw it from a distance and felt it in their bones. Bruce felt it most keenly. The raw power of a blast that size could kill a human many times over. It wouldn't kill Clark or Diana, but Bruce knew how fragile he was by comparison. His heart tightened. "Can that kill Doomsday?" Bruce asked. "No," Clark said. "A blast that big can't even kill me." A 4.8 million ton nuclear explosion was apocalyptic by human standards, but for Clark, it would at most evaporate water in his tissues and throw him into a brief incapacitation. A few seconds of sunlight would restore him. If that was true for Clark, it was even truer for Doomsday, who had already grown stronger and more resilient. And in some perverse way, a blast that evaporated moisture could trigger Doomsday's evolution. Clark's prediction proved correct. The nuclear strike didn't kill him. It provoked another metamorphosis. High in the sky, a crimson lightning storm, more than 10 kilometers across, erupted. Doomsday stood at its center, roaring as new, tougher exoskeleton plates sprouted and encased him. He grew again, this time to 8 meters tall, and his body became even harder. A thunderous, primal roar split the night. The evolved Doomsday fired a heat vision straight up, driving a beam through Earth's atmosphere, and then he began to fall. Despite the evolution, he still could not fly. Gravity took hold, and his 8-meter form plummeted earthward at terrifying speed. Watching from a distance, Xiao Ran couldn't help a dry laugh. "No matter how much you evolve, not being able to fly is still your biggest weakness," he muttered. He accelerated, a streak of motion surpassing Mach 8,000, heading straight for Doomsday's front. Even with the 7th evolution, the monster's strength had surpassed Xiao Ran's usual baseline. Xiao Ran's normal strength was over 300 million tons, but Doomsday now approached 1 billion. Yet speed and reflexes favored Xiao Ran. Doomsday never had the chance to react. Xiao Ran struck his exoskeleton-sheathed jaw with a thunderous punch. The surrounding air detonated. Doomsday wasn't cut to pieces by the blow, but his enormous body was hurled thousands of kilometers, crossing half of Eagle Country diagonally, and was launched back out of the atmosphere. Back in the command center, officers who had just learned the nuclear strike had failed, and may even have made Doomsday stronger, watched the screen in stunned silence as the creature vanished into space again. "How fast was that Kryptonian just now?" General Swanwick demanded. A technician studied the satellite telemetry, eyes wide. "General, that monster exceeded Mach 6,000. Then he added, even more incredulous, but even more shockingly, the attacker, Xiao Ran, exceeded Mach 8,000. Swanwick stared at the readout. Mach 8,000. What manner of being was Xiao Ran? He had always assumed Clark was as close to a god as Earth had seen. Clark's fastest recorded flight was near Mach 1,000, an astonishing speed on its own, far beyond anything the military's missiles could match. But compared to Xiao Ran, Mach 1000 looked modest, only 1/8 of that figure. The gap between them was vast and instantaneous. Why did fortune seem to favor Kryptonians so much? The question flitted through Swanwick's mind. Then he thought of what belief meant or didn't mean in his country. The leaders called for faith as comfort and cohesion, but few truly believed in gods anymore. Faith had, for many, become habit, tradition, a ritual passed down through generations. In Eagle Country, where superstition was mocked even as many clung to old rituals, genuine belief was rare. Temples thrived more from custom than conviction, and the younger generation often followed whatever their elders did, without deep faith of their own. Whether those customs would survive the slow drift of time was another matter entirely. Section 194. Every generation has its own way of doing things. Rituals like inviting gods will probably fade away in 20, 30, maybe 40, 50 years. Few people will still bother with them. Out in space, Doomsday, having been flung clear of the atmosphere, was thrashing, its whole body careening away from Earth in a grotesque, awkward posture. Its speed, however, was steadily dropping. Earth's gravity would eventually pull it to a halt, then yank it back toward the atmosphere so it would burn and fall like a meteor, unless someone interfered. Xiao Ran had already caught up. Seeing the directionless, howling mass drifting in the vacuum, he grinned and flew closer. "Big guy, can you hear me?" He shouted into Doomsday's mind with his telepathy. What came back was only raw, chaotic rage. There was no intelligence, no language, like talking to a brick wall. He shook his head. From a few hundred meters away, he unleashed heat vision. The beam struck Doomsday and shoved it clear of Earth's orbit toward the moon. Over 300,000 kilometers were covered in under a minute. Doomsday slammed into the lunar surface with a deafening impact, carving a crater over 1,000 meters wide. It rose roaring, but Xiao Ran was nowhere to be seen. Infuriated, the mindless monster began pounding at the moon, smashing satellites and setting off seismic shocks that shook the whole body. Xiao Ran materialized behind it, laughed, and kicked low. Doomsday had no gender to speak of, but the strike sent it tumbling out of lunar orbit. He followed with another blast of heat vision. Minutes later, his eyes were stinging and he had to stop. Doomsday, already spinning 1,000,000 kilometers away, kept emitting destructive beams, but had nothing to hit. Xiao Ran gaped. Not a single scratch marred the creature's exoskeleton. No scorch marks, nothing pierced. Its defense was frankly absurd. With its current evolution, Xiao Ran in his normal state could no longer harm it. Fortunately, he had a trump card. He concentrated, using his mind to force a change within himself. A name flared in his chest. Rage spiked, strength surged. Instantly, his whole body shifted. He vanished from the moon and rocketed forward. His speed climbed from 10,000 Mach to 20,000, then 30,000, finally peaking at a terrifying 40,000 Mach, about 13,600 kilometers per second. In less than 2 minutes, he closed the 1,000,000-kilometer gap and slammed into Doomsday. One punch, 1.9 billion tons of force, shattered the exoskeleton on impact. His fist drove into muscle, tearing chest tissue. Blood poured. He didn't stop. In a single second, he unleashed 1.08 million strikes, each carrying the same incredible force. When it was over, a 3-meter-wide hole had been driven clean through Doomsday's torso. The creature had been almost annihilated. If Xiao Ran had concentrated those blows on Doomsday's head, it would surely have been dead. This Doomsday lacked the comic book regenerative immortality. Still, it did not die. Xiao Ran held back and watched. Crimson lightning enveloped the beast as it screamed without sound. Flesh knit over the wound, new tissue surged up, sealing the hole. The storm grew, and Doomsday completed another evolution. It was different now, 10 meters tall, its exoskeleton a matte, pitch-black armor that wrapped almost its entire body. Only mouth and eyes remained exposed. Everything else was buried under that hostile shell. Even standing at a distance, Xiao Ran felt the chill of how terrifying it was. If Clark and the others ever faced Doomsday in this form, they wouldn't last a single encounter. Then Doomsday, whose flight had been erratic since leaving Earth's atmosphere, suddenly stopped. Its crimson eyes locked on Xiao Ran. The hair on the back of his neck rose. The presence was petrifying. The creature vanished. Where did it go? Xiao Ran barely had time to think before his vision went dark and a numbness ripped through him. He snapped back into awareness and discovered his legs were gone, both of them. He skidded to a halt as they began to regenerate. He turned and saw a terrible demonic silhouette racing past, faster than he was, with his severed legs clenched in its maw. It had eaten them. Then power flooded him from within. The crimson lightning storm that heralded Doomsday's evolution washed over a radius of several kilometers, and Xiao Ran felt himself change. The missing limbs grew back in moments. Only the fabric of his pants had been lost. His body felt denser, stronger. He opened his system interface and checked his character panel. His attributes had jumped. Strength had gone from 382.68 million tons to 1.52 billion tons. Defense, previously rated to withstand a 1 billion ton nuclear equivalent blast, now held up to a 6 billion ton equivalent. Speed had risen from Mach 8,259 to Mach 12,000. The first set of numbers had been his normal pre-evolution baseline. The second set were his new stats after this evolution. He could feel the change, more power, harder skin, and a speed that made his previous limits seem quaint. The game had just escalated. That was his normal readout after his first evolution. His strength had nearly quadrupled. His defense had surged 6-fold. His speed hadn't risen as dramatically, but it had still jumped by almost 4,000 Mach. This infinite evolution ability is ridiculously powerful, Xiao Ran thought, his eyes shining. And this was only one evolution. If he evolved a few more times, the possibilities were incredible. Doomsday, you really are my lucky star. Xiao Ran laughed out loud. After a gift like this, he could forgive Doomsday for eating his 2 legs earlier. 2 legs, what was the big deal? If the creature liked them so much, it could try the other leg next. He cheerfully closed the status panel and looked up, just in time to see a dark fist expanding to infinite size in his view. In silence, Doomsday's punch sent Xiao Ran flying for several thousand kilometers before he came to a stop. He touched his face and found not a single wound. A 6-fold defense boost did exactly what it promised. The same Xiao Ran who'd had his legs torn off earlier now took a full-force blow from Doomsday and walked away unscathed. No, I can't keep evolving like this, Xiao Ran muttered, irritated. He wasn't trying to awaken some special passive. He wanted the easy route, more evolutions, faster gains. At least 2 more, if possible. Gigantification! With a thought, he activated Gigantification. His body swelled to 60 feet tall, over 18 meters, now even larger than the 10-meter Doomsday. His strength quadrupled again. His defense tripled. With 6.08 billion tons of force behind him, he charged and unleashed millions of punches against Doomsday's dark exoskeleton. For the first time, he actually broke through the armor. Black blood flowed. He had finally managed to injure Doomsday. Satisfied, Xiao Ran pulled back several thousand kilometers and watched. Doomsday, in the middle of a crimson lightning storm, began evolving again. 9th evolution. Lightning cracked and muscles tore. Doomsday shot up nearly 5 meters taller to about 15 meters, every muscle bulging monstrously. Worse, 2 new arms tore free from behind its ribs. The new limbs were as thick as the originals, each ending in razor claws that promised to shred a body to pieces. Good heavens, 4-armed Doomsday? Xiao Ran breathed, stunned. The revelation gave no time for thought. Doomsday slammed forward and punched Xiao Ran clean through. Even at his larger size, Xiao Ran had a hole blown through him. Blood sprayed into the void. The new claws snatched at him, ripping off his arms with brutal efficiency. A kick to the abdomen nearly pulverized his internal organs. He was hurled millions of kilometers at a speed approaching 100,000 Mach before blacking out. When he came to, he probed his empty shoulders, then looked across the distance, where Doomsday now chewed on his freshly torn-off arms. That fiend had eaten all his limbs again. Rage flared, then something else happened. Rumble. A crimson lightning storm erupted around Xiao Ran in a 10-kilometer radius. 2nd evolution. In an instant, his arms regenerated, his shattered organs knitted themselves whole, and the strength of every cell in his body was bolstered 6 or 7-fold. Evolution complete. He felt the terrifying power coursing through him and grinned despite the pain. Losing his arms had been costly, but the payoff was enormous. The readouts updated. Strength, 1.52 billion tons. Strength, 6.08 billion tons. Defense, can withstand a 6 billion-ton nuclear explosion. Defense, can withstand a 42 billion-ton nuclear explosion. Speed, 12,000 Mach. Speed, 19,000 Mach. His strength had surged again, another 4-fold jump. His defense was now 7 times greater, and his speed had climbed by 7,000 Mach to 19,000 Mach, roughly 60 kilometers per second in atmosphere. He knew that in the vacuum of space, his speed could spike even higher. Doomsday charged again, as hungry as ever, trying to pluck Xiao Ran's head. Xiao Ran tilted his head and casually blocked the strike. "Are you tickling me?" he sneered. His right hand blurred into an afterimage and then vanished. Within 1 second, Xiao Ran fired off millions of punches at Doomsday's chest. The giant staggered and was flung millions of kilometers before finally stopping. From that distance, Doomsday's armored chest still looked pristine, unmarked. Xiao Ran blinked in shock. His base 6.08 billion tons strength, multiplied 4-fold by gigantification, gave him an effective 24.32 billion tons of force. Yet after millions of hits, Doomsday hadn't taken a scratch, only distance. A chill of disbelief ran through him. Then he smiled wickedly. He'd figured out how to trigger the Black and Strong tenfold effect over the past 2 days. It was simple. Hypnotize himself, summon a blackened mindset, and the ability activated. He'd done hypnotic tricks before. Convincing himself was easy. In an instant, a Black and Strong tenfold buff blossomed through him. His strength in every aspect shot up tenfold. This blackened strong tenfold stacks with the previous gigantification boost. In other words, Xiao Ran's current strength is 4 times 10, 40 times his normal state, and his defense is 3 times 10, gives 30 times. Speed, neural response, and other abilities also saw general improvements, but gigantification itself only multiplies strength and defense. Speed gains come from larger stride and mass rather than direct enhancement, and other powers don't receive the same multiplier, so those aspects only improved by a normal tenfold. Even so, it was terrifying. I feel like I could have killed myself a second ago, Xiao Ran muttered as he clenched his fists. He was terrifyingly strong in that moment. Then, in an instant, he vanished and reappeared millions of kilometers away, directly in front of Doomsday. One punch shattered the exoskeleton across Doomsday's chest in several places. His defense was monstrous. Xiao Ran narrowed his eyes and followed with a furious heat vision that ripped a web of cracks through the armored chest. He pursued relentlessly. At his current speed, Doomsday had no time to react before Xiao Ran hammered him again and again. Half the exoskeleton was fissured, and then Doomsday slammed into a fiery red surface. The impact pulverized the ground. Hundreds of kilometers-wide swaths of terrain collapsed into craters. Boulders weighing hundreds or thousands of tons were thrown into the sky and rained back down under gravity. Xiao Ran paused, looking at the planet below. I somehow fought my way to Mars, he said to himself. In a vast crater nearly 1,000 kilometers across, Doomsday, his exoskeleton shattered, roared, and charged. His forearms struck continuously, but Xiao Ran's speed outmatched him. A single kick sent Doomsday slamming back into the surface of Mars, creating another crater over 1,000 kilometers wide. The whole planet trembled as if in an earthquake. A crimson storm of lightning spread across the sky. Xiao Ran hovered above, watching from the air. Doomsday had reached his 10th evolution. It's almost at its limit, Xiao Ran thought. After Doomsday's 9th evolution, even if Xiao Ran achieved his 2nd evolution, the damage he could inflict was limited, enough to crack exoskeleton, nothing more. Now Doomsday had reached the 10th. Even if Xiao Ran could injure him again and gain a 3rd evolution, breaking Doomsday's defense seemed unlikely. Fortunately, Xiao Ran still had his infinite rage buff that could stack. If he could layer another 15 times infinite rage buff, he might be able to kill 10th evolution Doomsday. But what if Doomsday evolved again? At 11 evolutions, even with all Xiao Ran's stacked statuses, piercing that defense might be impossible. 10 evolutions was the practical limit. Beyond that, they risked a deadlock where neither side could break the other's defense. How would Xiao Ran clear the game then? The newly evolved Doomsday now towered over the gigantified Xiao Ran, a terrifying 25 meters tall. Just its presence made Xiao Ran's heart pound. Bang! Doomsday's speed had risen close to Xiao Ran's. Let's see how much this evolution has amplified you, Xiao Ran thought. If 5 times infinite rage could break his defense, Xiao Ran could risk letting Doomsday evolve again. He might even extract another trait from Doomsday to boost himself further. But if not, then it would be game over. Both figures vanished and reappeared as streaks of light, black and white, colliding repeatedly through Mars's atmosphere. Rage plus 1,000%, strength 500%. Xiao Ran's rage soared, and his strength surged 5-fold. Punches rained down on Doomsday. The 25-meter brute's fingers were larger than Xiao Ran's head. Xiao Ran landed blow after blow and could not move him an inch. Likewise, Doomsday's hits failed to breach Xiao Ran's defense. They rampaged across the Martian surface like 2 titanic beasts. Mars itself was being plowed, pitted and cratered, the planet trembling as though it might shatter. Minutes passed. Xiao Ran had ramped his infinite rage buff to 10 times, but still could not break Doomsday's defense. Conversely, Doomsday couldn't break Xiao Ran's either. After the 10 times boost, Doomsday's speed fell behind Xiao Ran, and he ended up taking the beating. Paradoxically, a single punch from Xiao Ran at that stage only pushed Doomsday back a step. With each evolution, defense surged the most. After 10 stacks, Doomsday's defense was at least 1,000 times greater than his offensive power. No, I can't hit him, Xiao Ran admitted. The anger drained from him. His infinite rage buff at 12 times dissipated. He even canceled gigantification. His defense dropped by another 3-fold. Now Doomsday could finally inflict effective damage, but it was still limited. A giant palm closed around Xiao Ran, trying to crush him. Even with all of Doomsday's strength, only muscle fibers tore, his bones and organs remained intact. If both continued evolving, neither would be able to truly break the other's defenses. For the moment, with only the blackened strong tenfold remaining, Doomsday could inflict superficial injuries. But that wouldn't be enough for Xiao Ran to progress. So Xiao Ran allowed himself to be brutally beaten for over 10 minutes. He took the hits, sustained more serious injuries, and finally, an aching surge rolled through him. The Crimson Storm flared again, pushing Doomsday away. Xiao Ran's expression shifted to one of relish as the surge of new power flooded him. A few seconds later, third evolution complete. Strength, 6.08 billion tons, 15.2 billion tons. Defense, withstand a 42 billion ton equivalent nuclear blast, withstand a 231 billion ton equivalent nuclear blast. Speed, Mach 19,000, Mach 21,000. This evolution's gains were noticeably smaller than the last. Strength increased only 2.5 times, defense rose about 5.5 times, and speed improved by just 2,000 Mach. The injuries Xiao Ran had taken still hadn't been severe enough to trigger a larger leap. Doomsday had already done everything he could. Xiao Ran had let him smash him viciously for over 10 minutes. The main problem had been Xiao Ran's ridiculously strong regenerative ability. As soon as he was injured, the wounds would start to close. A second later, they were gone. For the first time, Xiao Ran found his undying body a little annoying. Fortunately, the improvement he just gained wasn't huge, but it wasn't nothing either. A 2.5's boost in base strength wouldn't be enough to one-shot Doomsday, but it did give him one more chance to extract Doomsday's character entry. That was all he needed to complete the clearing achievement. Giantization. The moment the evolution completed, Xiao Ran activated Giantization. He instantly towered into a 60-foot colossus. His strength surged fourfold to 608 billion tons. His defense tripled, letting him withstand the equivalent of a 6.93 trillion-ton nuclear blast. He didn't stop there. Xiao Ran stacked infinite rage. His rage spiked and the buff climbed to tenfold. Strength, 6.08 trillion tons. Defense, able to withstand a 693.033 trillion-ton nuclear blast. With the buff active, Xiao Ran blurred out of sight and reappeared with one massive hand wrapped around Doomsday's leg, swinging him like a toy. Simultaneously, the system notified him that Doomsday's character entry was now extractable. Xiao Ran didn't hesitate. He used his last extraction chance and took Doomsday's entry. I am your Doomsday. Ding. The system's confirmation hit him and a character panel unfolded before his eyes. Nender male. Lifespan, 17,501.5, 10,000 years. Strength, 15.2 billion tons. Defense, can withstand a nuclear explosion equivalent to 100 trillion tons. Speed, 211,000 Mach, 71,007 kilometers per second. Bloodline, superpowers, evolution, divine power, time travel. Extracted entries, Steel Body Superman, Steel Body Big Boss, true. Big Boss Infinite Rage, Undying Body, Giant Faded, Six Gods Power, Power of the Six Demon Kings, Superman Spider-Man, Devourer, Time Traveler, Demigod Body, Blackened Strong Tenfold, Infinite Evolution, I am your Doomsday. After the extraction, Xiao Ran's normal state stats had jumped. 315.2 billion tons of strength, defenses that could take a 100 trillion ton nuclear blast, and a top speed rivaling a quarter of light. He laughed. This haul was far beyond his expectations. With Blackened Strong Tenfold active, his strength shot to 3.152 trillion tons. Giantization amplified it again to 12.608 trillion tons. Infinite Rage stacked to 12-fold. His strength exploded past 100 trillion tons and settled at 1.51296 quadrillion tons. One punch sheared a chunk from Doomsday's chest. Another blew his head apart, flesh and blood vaporizing into nothing. Then Xiao Ran seized the headless corpse and activated Devourer. Whoosh! The massive remains were consumed and absorbed into him. When the system recalculated, his normal state strength read 495.2 billion tons. His defense and speed adjusted accordingly. Xiao Ran laughed out loud. This victory had paid off more than he dared hope. Metropolis, Hero Park. Clark and the others had been waiting for Xiao Ran to return with the news. 2 hours had passed, and worry was creeping in. until Clark's solemn face broke into a smile. He's here. A moment later, Xiao Ran descended and landed before them, grinning. Hi, did you miss me? You're finally back. Clark rushed forward and hugged him. Bruce's expression was tight with questions. Is Doomsday dealt with? Xiao Ran's smile was all the answer they needed. Yes, he's done. It took some effort. Their tension released like a snapped wire. Diana, satisfied the crisis was over, began to leave. All right, I should go. Wait, Bruce started, but Diana only flicked her lasso of truth, looped it around a passing cloud, and launched herself away. Bruce looked abandoned. Is this the first time you've been put in a difficult spot by a woman? Xiao Ran teased, watching Bruce's flustered silence. Ha ha! Xiao Ran laughed, enjoying Bruce's speechless expression. The next morning, Xiao Ran gently stroked Janet's back as she slept and left her be. He left a short note on the living room table and slipped out. From the start, neither he nor Janet had ever declared an official relationship. Neither had asked to be the other's partner, but their tacit understanding had held. Now, though, Xiao Ran was leaving. After Doomsday died, Xiao Ran had exactly 24 hours left in that world. Nearly 8 of those hours had already passed. He hadn't gone off into space to sunbathe for the remaining time. Even if he had, the gain would have been negligible. To be honest, he found the idea almost laughable now. It was like someone who used to be happy earning 100 yuan a day, suddenly inheriting hundreds of millions. Would that person still care about the 100? Xiao Ran felt the same way. He'd gained 20,000 tons of strength in a day, but compared to his current 495.2 billion tons, that increase was microscopic, about 24.76 million of what he already had. At that rate, even if he sunbathed 24 hours a day, it would take him 24.76 million days, over 67,000 years, to double his strength. Ridiculous. If he wanted a real jump, it would be better to find someone far stronger and let them hit him hard. One decisive evolution could multiply his strength 2 or 3 times at least. The trouble was, where do you find someone stronger than him? Not in the American comic world, and not in Zongman world either. He could try to attract the attention of those ancient monsters, but not the conceptual godlike entities. If he drew that kind of attention, he wouldn't be able to handle it. When I go back, maybe I can be even more reckless, he thought. Maybe I'll catch someone's eye. But he reminded himself not to go too far. On a cliff, Clark watched him with surprise. You're leaving again? Yes, I only came back to take a look. Now that I've seen everything, I have to go, Xiao Ran replied. Clark hesitated. What about Janet? You two? We're just friends. Don't read into it, Xiao Ran said, meeting his gaze. Clark blinked, then gave him a mock thumbs up. Right, sure, just friends. All right. I came to tell you, don't miss me too much, Xiao Ran said with a smile. His time was almost up. Only minutes remained. He'd already been to Wayne Manor and had 2 steaks Alfred had cooked for him before he came here. Don't worry, I won't miss you, Clark replied, then threw his arms around Xiao Ran and clapped him hard on the back. Take care, brother. You too. Be careful. Don't let me come back and find you've become hated across Earth, Xiao Ran teased. Clark looked half hurt. Seeing the expression, Xiao Ran laughed and shot into the sky, disappearing in an instant. Clark exhaled a long breath. Xiao Ran was gone again, and now he was the only Kryptonian left on Earth. He still had Louise, though. Pulling a small ring from his pocket, a ring his mother had given him when he planned to propose, the same ring Jonathan had used to propose to Martha, he felt the weight of inheritance in his hand. Perhaps it's time, Clark thought. He wanted to give Louise a real home. Zongman World, Mihua Town, 2nd floor of a villa. Xiao Ran opened his eyes on the bed. I'm back, he said aloud, glancing at the alarm clock. Exactly 6 a.m. He'd stayed in the American comic world until he'd cleared the instance before returning. It had only been about a week in real time, but it felt like another era. Next time I won't clear the whole thing in one go, he decided, then got up. 10 minutes later, he'd washed and brushed his teeth. By the time he'd changed, it was nearly 6:20. From downstairs came the sound of sword practice. Mitsuri was in the courtyard pacing and swinging her sword. Mitsuri, time to eat, Xiao Ran called. Coming. Her eyes lit up when she heard eat. She put away her sword and ran inside. Good morning, Sir Xiao Ran, she chimed, giggling. Morning. Let's go, he said. They took their keys and walked to the snack street, where Mitsuri's popularity was unchanged. Everyone greeted her. She came away laden with bags overflowing with breakfast treats, grinning like a kid who'd won the jackpot. Watching her get so excited over food, Xiao Ran couldn't help but marvel at her innocence. "Is that enough? Let's go home," he asked when she could barely carry another thing. Okay, Sir Xiao Ran." Mitsuri answered happily and trailed behind him. As they walked, two boys in school uniforms approached. The one in front moved with cool, detached confidence, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed straight ahead. Xiao Ran did a double take. He knew that face. Shishigami Hiro. He'd bumped into him before, and now he saw him again. Only this time, Hiro's body wasn't flesh and blood. His frame was metal and mechanical, so he had been modified. Xiao Ran hadn't paid much attention the night before. He'd been curious about the Kryptonians he'd seen, but had missed observing them, and now he felt a pang of regret for not paying closer attention. Hiro glanced back at them as the two groups passed. "What's up?" Ando Naoyuki, the other boy asked, following his line of sight. "Oh, ahow, are you looking at that girl?" Ando teased, draping an arm around Hiro's shoulders. "No, I'm looking at that boy," Hiro said flatly. Ando froze. If he hadn't known Hiro for years, he might have suspected his friend had some unexpected inclinations, but familiarity kept him from jumping to conclusions. He merely raised an eyebrow and let the moment pass as they continued on. "He's special," Shishigami Hiro said. Since his modifications the night before, Hiro had a rough idea of what his body could do. He could control most modern electronic devices, cars, TVs, computers, and phones. A jetpack on his back let him fly. Energy cannons in his arms could obliterate targets. He could even manipulate the electromagnetic signals of electronic devices and kill people remotely. He'd proven it the night before, casually picking a displeasing mob and, through a television, blowing the man's head off. In Hiro's eyes, everyone in this world was almost like ants, trash he could crush at will. Still, his electronic eyes had another function. They could scan people's bodies like an X-ray, revealing bones and organs. When activated, everyone around him turned into skeletal frames and piles of internal organs. At first, that disturbed him, but he quickly adjusted. The scan could be toggled on and off, so he didn't have to stare at everyone like that. As he idly scrolled the electronic scan over the crowd this morning, he found two anomalies: Kanroji Mitsuri and a boy he couldn't scan at all, Xiao Ran. Mitsuri was straightforwardly unusual. Her muscle density was about 8 times that of a normal person. Xiao Ran, however, baffled him. Hiro's scan couldn't penetrate him at all. The one male student who had just passed by earlier had also appeared normal to the scan. Hiro's electronic eyes had flat out failed on him. It was the first time he had seen such a thing. So when Hiro turned back and muttered, "He's special," Ando Naoyuki immediately glanced over, suspicious. "All right, stop staring. Let's go have breakfast," Ando said, tugging Hiro along with a smile. Xiao Ran met Hiro's gaze as he was being dragged away. The two of them locked eyes for a moment. Xiao Ran gave a slight smile and a small nod. Hiro's mind jumped to, "He knows I'm special too." No, he definitely knows. Then Xiao Ran looked away and continued home with Mitsuri. "I wonder if anyone on the forum knows about Kryptonians visiting Earth," Xiao Ran thought. He intended to check the supernatural forum later. Why had Kryptonians appeared in the Zongmen world? And why had they modified 2 Earthlings? "Mitsuri, I'm off to school. If you get bored, you can go out and explore a bit," Xiao Ran said after breakfast. "It's fine, Xiao Ran Tongshe," Mitsuri replied with a smile. "I used to stay on the island practicing breathing techniques. You don't need to worry about me getting bored." Xiao Ran was relieved. People liked different things. Some craved excitement, others peace. Mitsuri clearly enjoyed staying home and practicing. Forcing her into a school life she didn't want would be cruel. He had once considered enrolling Mitsuri in Taiten High, but in the end he chose not to push her into something she might dislike. "Okay, take care," Mitsuri called at the entrance, waving as Xiao Ran left. Once he was gone, she shut the door, ran to the snack room, pulled out a huge pile of treats, and settled in to eat while watching TV. For her, that was heaven. On his way to school, Xiao Ran pulled out his phone and logged on to the Supernatural Forum to look for anything about the Kryptonians. A few minutes later, he found a thread. "I think I saw a spaceship over Tokyo last night." Did anyone else see it? The poster wrote, attaching a photo. The ship wasn't the stereotypical flying saucer. It was triangular and bluish-gray with sharp edges, ultra-modern and clearly advanced. Hundreds of replies followed, mostly jokes and accusations of Photoshop. No one had linked the sighting to Kryptonians. Feeling a little disappointed, Xiao Ran considered messaging Satoru Gojo for insight. He sent Gojo a message and kept browsing, but by the time he reached the school gate, there was no reply. Gojo was probably still asleep. After all, he wasn't a student. In second year B, Xiao Ran set his books on his seat, and a warm weight wrapped around his neck from behind. Xiao Ran, good morning, Sonoko giggled, pressing a kiss to his cheek. A few classmates glanced over and started whispering. When did Suzuki Tongshe get together with Xiao Ran Tongshe? I saw them holding hands at school a few days ago. Unbelievable. Suzuki got there first. Don't envy him. Suzuki is the second daughter of the Suzuki Financial Group. Xiao Ran's lucky. Yeah, he's so lucky. Sonoko ignored the whispers. Right now, her whole world was Xiao Ran. Classmates were background noise. Tomorrow's the weekend. Any plans? She asked with a bright smile. Not yet, Xiao Ran answered. Why? Do you have something in mind? How about we go skiing in Hokkaido? Sonoko suggested. She glanced over at Ran, who was absorbed in his phone. Ran, are you coming? Huh? Go where? Ran asked, finally looking up. Chapter 200, Section 200. Ran clearly hadn't heard their conversation. She still looked bewildered. Ran, let's go skiing in Hokkaido. Sonoko released Xiao Ran's arm and darted over to Ran, leaning in with a bright smile. Huh? Skiing? Sure. Ran nodded. She wasn't good at skiing and would probably have to learn on the spot. Then it's settled. Sonoko raised her hand with a grin. This weekend, we're going skiing in Hokkaido. I'll ask Miko and Xiaohua if they want to come too. Once Sonoko decided, she immediately started planning. Luckily, her family had a villa in Hokkaido that sat empty most of the time. They could use it for the weekend without booking a hotel. There were still preparations to make. Skis, clothes, protective gear, but that was nothing for Sonoko. One call to the household staff, and everything would be arranged. During lunch, she found Miko and Xiaohua and invited them. They admitted they'd never skied before. It's fine, Ran can't ski either. I'll teach you. It's simple, Sonoko promised, pounding her chest dramatically. After thinking it over, Miko and Xiaohua agreed. Oh right, should we go say hello to Snowbelow from Class A? Miko suddenly remembered. Sonoko slapped her forehead. She had nearly forgotten. It was lunchtime, so they could head over now to see if the transfer student was in Class A. While the three girls trooped off to Class A, Xiao Ran had already gone up to the rooftop of the main building. Feeling the cool breeze, he pulled out his phone and reread Satoru Gojo's reply on the forum. Kryptonian? I know a little about them. I heard there was an organization that cooperated with Kryptonians, but I don't know the details. Want me to help find someone to ask? Xiao Ran typed back quickly, thanking him. After putting his phone away, he stared out at the distant sky, wondering what kind of organization would have cooperated with Kryptonians, why they would cooperate, and over what. As he was lost in thought, footsteps approached from behind. He turned. Excuse me, I didn't know anyone else came up here, a calm voice said. Snowbelow, Yukino stood there, looking at him with composed reserve. You're the new transfer student, right? She asked. Xiao Ran smiled slightly. The rooftop isn't just mine. Make yourself at home. Yukino nodded, carried a box over, wiped down the table and chair with a handkerchief, and set out several neat bento boxes. So she came up here to eat, he thought, and let his attention drift back toward the city. From where he sat, he could see two people on the other side of town, Shishigami Hiro and Inuyashiki Ichiro. Like Shishigami, Inuyashiki had been transformed into a machine by Kryptonians, but whereas Shishigami seemed to accept it calmly, Inuyashiki looked deeply unsettled. Xiao Ran watched as Inuyashiki walked the streets pretending to be heading to work. He used his power to save an injured bird, then helped a wounded kitten, repairing its leg. One kills, one saves, Xiao Ran mused. To say it was unplanned felt like a stretch. At the same time, Shishigami was using his ability to confront some school bullies who had tormented Ando Naoyuki. Only his retaliation was merciless. He blew their heads off. The killings were thorough and secretive. No one had yet tied them to him. Inuyashiki later entered a hospital and tried to use his power to help terminal patients, but he was discovered acting oddly and fled in panic. Xiao Ran couldn't help laughing to himself. Inuyashiki meant well, but he moved like a thief caught red-handed. Anxious, guilty, overly cautious. It fit his personality, a careful older salaryman who didn't want trouble. "Hello," Yukino's voice broke into his thoughts. He turned. "Have you eaten yet?" she asked, looking a little embarrassed, a touch shy. In Xiao Ran's memory, Yukino's early impression had been that of an icy beauty who kept people at arm's length and spoke sharply. But now, aside from a composed coolness, she seemed almost bashful. "Not yet," he said. "I have too much," she admitted after a moment, nodding toward the array of bentos. "Would you like some? I can't finish it all." Xiao Ran grinned. "Then I won't be rude." He sat at the other chair, and Yukino offered him a pair of spare chopsticks. When their fingers brushed as he reached for them, she flinched like a startled deer, jerking her hand back and coloring immediately. Xiao Ran paused, amused. She was unexpectedly cute. He hadn't met many girls who blushed so easily from a light touch. "Well then, I'll start," he said, picking up his chopsticks. Yukino nodded, still looking down at her food, and began to eat in small, careful bites. "You're Snow Below, Yukino, right?" He ventured to break the awkward silence. Yes," she spoke softly. "And you're Xiao Ran from Class B." He nodded. She glanced up for a second, then looked away as if studying the distant view. "I've heard of you." "You've heard of me?" Xiao Ran was surprised. He'd tried to stay low-key at school. "What did you hear?" Yukino hesitated, then answered in a small voice. "Some girls in Class A said you're the best-looking boy in Class B." Xiao Ran couldn't help a short laugh. Girls had been gossiping. He supposed some stories traveled fast. He took another bite, and the rooftop settled into companionable quiet as the two of them ate.